Hello world and welcome back. Let's make a stylized house in Blender. All right, this is what we're going to be making. We're going to do some modeling, some texturing, some lighting. We're going to get into geometry nodes. We're going to get into procedural shading. We're going to use some particle systems. So if you're new to Blender and these systems scare you, then this is a perfect toe dip into the deep end of the wonderful world of Blender. So let's jump in. We're just going to do some basic box modeling. We're going to hit E to extrude the top face of our square to make this little mid-size roof, and then we're going to scale it with S. And then we're just going to hit E again, bring it up, just E, S, E, S, E, S. That's, in the early going, that's really all you need to do. This is essentially box modeling. That's all it is. Just E to extrude, S to scale. Now hit Control R. And that adds a loop cut, okay? And we'll create this, kind of the top roof section. And then we can extrude those out on the Y axis. If you want to extrude something directionally, you just tap the axis. Okay, I'm just going to deselect these faces here, and then I'll bring this out just the tiniest little bit more. Okay, create that little overhang. All right, so pretty quickly we've got the trimmings of a house. All right, I'm gonna take this bottom face and extrude that again, scale it again, extrude it down to create the foundation of the house, and then I'm gonna take the two faces on the front and the back and scale those out just a scotch to create that base foundation. Go into your preferences and add an add-on called the Bool tool. Okay, and we're going to use the Bool tool to create some windows. So hit Shift A to add another cube. All right, this is really fun. And then scale it down to about this window size. Okay, and bring it up. And what this does, this creates holes in geometry. And then Shift D to create a duplicate of that square. That's going to be our window frame. Okay, and then hide that duplicate. Now select the box, and then Shift select the house and hit Control Numpad minus. And if you have Bool tool enabled, you will create a hole in your geometry, and that's going to be our window. Okay, this is just a really quick and easy, down and dirty way to create holes in geometry. Let's go object to geometry, scale that in a little bit. I showed the layer that I just hid. Okay, let's add some geometry to this window. I'll hit Control R and then loop cut up a couple times and scale it down on the Z. And then same thing again, loop cut. If you middle mouse after hitting Control R, you'll add more loop cuts, and then just scale it on the X, the shape of our window frame. Then take that main face and extrude it in. And boom, just like that. In seconds, using the Bool tool, we've got a window carved into our house and a window frame.
Save your work. Save your work. Save your work.
Okay, let's add a bevel modifier on this son of a gun down here. Bump the segments up to 2 and bring that amount down to whatever you want. This is just to give it some, if you want something to look stylized, you're really going to want to run with the bevel modifier. It just kind of rounds out all of the edges. Okay, awesome. Now let's Shift D on that window. We'll duplicate that window and just create a couple more windows down here. And we'll Shift D that and then grab it over on the X axis. And now we've got our two front windows and our second story window. Okay, let's add another cube. Create this, get this door frame going. We'll bring that up and then scale it on the Z, about the shape of the door. Shift D to create the duplicate. That'll be our frame. And then same thing as last time. Select the door, shift click, select the house, Control Numpad minus, and boom, just like that. We've got a hole in the door. We select our duplicate, and that's going to be our frame. Bring it up. And then you can hit I to inset. And that'll inset the faces, and we'll create our door frame. You'll notice that that's a different way of doing it than we did with our windows. With our windows, we added a loop cut. And then now we're just hitting I to inset. That's a big deal, right? There's no one right way to do this. I'm going to Shift D on that door and grab it on the y-axis to create the back door on the back porch of our house. Flip it on the z-axis 180 degrees. And then I'm going to do the same thing with our windows. I'm going to Shift D, grab it on the y-axis, and then pirouette that son of a gun. Rotate it on the z at 180. And now I got a little back window, and I'm going to do the same thing with that other side. So pretty quickly, we've got the shape of a house, we've got some windows, we've used the bool tool, we've used the bevel modifiers, and the whole rest of the modeling is essentially this way. I'm going to do the exact same thing with that top window. Shift D, because repetition is the mother of skill. Grab it on the Y. R, Z, 180, pirouettes it. Let's get the roof going. Okay, so we'll Shift A to add another cube. Scale that son of a gun up. And then scale it on the X axis. I'm just going to take the bottom verts and scale those on the Y to kind of create the shape of the roof of the house. I'm going to take the two sides, inset those just a scotch, and grab those in on the X axis as well to create a little divot. And then I'm going to duplicate that top window and create some windows for our, I don't know, this isn't technically an attic. It's more just the side of the second story. And then let's get some windows on the side of the house as well. I'm just hitting Shift D, and then I'm just sizing stuff up, and I'm eyeballing it. And then I'll hit Shift D again, pirouette that son of a gun on the Z axis 180 degrees, grab it on the X axis, and now I got a side window. So now I've got fronts, sides, backs of the house, windows. We're good to go. We are shucking and jiving, bobbing and weaving. Let's add another cube with Shift A and create that little chimney. Little chimenea. This is where the smoke comes out of American houses that have fireplaces. And then we'll just take that top face, extrude it, scale it, extrude it, and hit I to inset that in. And then E to extrude it down to create a little depression to go into the chimney. So let's create a beam and then scale it and then just size this guy up right here. Okay. And then here I'm going to add a mirror modifier. And then my mirror object is obviously going to be the house. And you'll see that now I've got two beams. I've got two posts. I said beams. Okay. And then I'm going to have it mirrored on the X-axis and the Y-axis, just like that. And so now we've got these, these structural beams around on each corner of the house. Now let's create the posts for our front porch. Okay. And this is just going to be the same game that we've been playing. Extrude, scale, extrude, scale, extrude, scale, extrude, scale. Okay, and we're just going to create these, get some beams going. And, they are going to be sharp corners. That's no problem. We'll add a bevel modifier momentarily, and we'll smooth these up, make them look nice and stylized. And add a bevel modifier, okay? And we'll smooth that out, nice and easy. Then let's add a mirror modifier and make sure the mirror object is the house. That's important because Blender needs to know around which object we're trying to mirror. And just like that, we've got two posts, and they are symmetrical. Let's Shift D, and I'm going to grab these on the X-axis. And if you just have one object selected and it has a mirrored component, the mirror will duplicate as well, which is great. So now we've got beams for our front porch. I'm just going to create these tiny little, these little guys right here for our steps that to which we'll connect our railing. And then same thing. Let's add a bevel modifier, round this out, and then let's add a mirror modifier. And then same thing. Our mirror object has to be the house. So repetition is the mother of skill. Hopefully now you're seeing that the whole way we're doing all of this is just pretty simple, and it's the same stuff every time. Now I'm just going to add a beam real quick. I'm just going to scale this in and rotate it, just a little handrail for the few steps that we have. If you're trying to scale something on an axis and it's not doing it, double click the axis. Instead of hitting scale Y, hit scale YY, and that'll constrain it to that axis specifically. another mirror modifier, another bevel modifier, and we're good to go. I'm just going to add a plane and scale it out so that this will be our yard and the road, which we'll make momentarily. I think we need to get some steps going here. Let's get some steps. So we'll Shift A to add another cube. Oh, this is fun. Let's Control B. We haven't beveled yet. We'll Control B to bevel that, and then middle mouse wheel up a bunch of times. And then this menu is going to pop up. Hit Custom over here, and then play with the width to create the size of the steps that you want. But custom is very important right there. Okay? And very quickly, we've got some steps. Let's hit Shift A again, and we'll create this little sidewalk right here. And then I'm just going to grab the two verts out to get it, to about, where the road would start. I'm going to grab the bottom vert and then extrude these out to create that sidewalk from our walkway. Okay, now let's get our window going. So I'm going to select these edges around our window frame and hit F to create a face. And then I'll make a loop cut right down the middle, and then a few loop cuts broadside to create our window panes. Okay, and then I'm just going to hit Inset, and then something tiny. You can hit I.01 or I.02 and do the same for each individual box. I.01, I.01, I think I'm doing 0.01 or 0.02. That's not showing up. And this is going to inset it a very tiny amount, but just enough to create, these will be the window panes for our window. And then let's select each window frame face, extrude it out a tiny little bit. Okay, and that'll be our window frame. And then same thing, let's smooth that up with a bevel modifier, and then give it a mirror modifier, and then make sure our mirror object is the house, and just like that, our other window has a window frame. Very quickly, let's Shift D on both of these and create window frames for the side of the house, just like that. Okay, and now let's create our door. Okay, so same thing. Select the edge around our door and hit F to make a face. And then same thing, bunch of loop cuts. And we'll do the exact same thing for our door. We'll give our door a few window panes to look through as well. And it's just real simple. Again, repetition is the mother of skill. I.01, I.01, I.01. Okay, and now here I'm doing it backwards. I'm going to select each one of these faces, and then I'm going to extrude them back. Okay, now that doesn't line up with our reference images, so I can go in and grab the individual edges and tap G to line them up with the edges from our reference. Okay, and this is just the strength of box modeling from a reference, so you can make it how it actually needs to look. So I'll select these faces, inset them just a tiny little bit. Now let's add a UV sphere and scale this son of a gun down. We'll just make a quick little doorknob. I'll scale this down and then rotate it 90 degrees and grab it right about there. Let's Shift A to add another cube, and let's make the planks for our porch. Okay, so just scale this. You can make your wooden planks however large you need to make them, and slide that over. Okay, and then we're going to use the array modifier over here after we use the bevel modifier, obviously, to smooth that down a little bit, make it nice and stylized. Okay, then let's add another modifier. Let's add the array modifier right here. And first, let's give it some space, 0.03. It's just so there's some space in between each board, and then just bump up the number on the array and go all the way across your porch. Okay, so this is the value of the array modifier. You just need one wooden plank, and then just like that, bada bing, you've got a nice little porch. Let's add a mirror modifier and make it and mirror it along the y-axis with the house as the object, and now I've got a back porch. Okay, so we only made one plank, but using the array modifier and the mirror modifier, we've got a front porch and a back porch. And then let's get the side going as well. Let's do the same thing for the side. So I'm just going to take one plank, same thing, array modifier, and then bump it up accordingly, and then mirror mirror this and make sure that you've mirrored it on the x-axis. And just like that, we've got a porch that runs all the way around our house. Okay, let's go into the shader editor and let's create a brick texture. Okay, Shift A for brick texture. Blender just straight up gives it to you, which is amazing. All right, but it's a little wonky at first, so we're gonna have to do some stuff to it. Okay, just follow me. Let's Shift A to add a texture coordinate. Connect the UV to the vector, and just like that, you can see now we got some brick shapes, which is amazing. Okay, hit up cube projection. That's a pretty big deal. You can see that they're all kind of uniform, but they're a little bit wider than we want them. So then here is where you can, using the scale, slide the scale in any direction, and you can make them as big or as small as you need them to be. And just like that, we've got procedural bricks, which is great. So we're building the foundation of the house. Now with the colors, you can play around and make them whatever color you'd like to make. I'm going to make it kind of an orange-red for my color 1. Okay, my color 2, I'm going to make it very bright red. And then the mortar, I'm going to have my mortar be lighter. So lighter is obviously for newer brick, and darker would obviously be for older brick. Okay, and you can play around with this, and you can see there's some really neat, beautiful variation between colors. All right, now I'm going to Shift A and add a noise texture, okay, because it's a little bit too clean right now. I'm going to Shift A again and add a color ramp. Follow me. You're going to do great. You can do this. I believe in you, okay? Connect the factor to the factor and the color to color 1, okay? Now, it goes to gray, but that's because we've got a grayscale right here. Don't worry about that. We're going to change it. Make that first color kind of a sandy brown, and then make that second color brilliant red. Okay, nicely done. Look at that. We've got some. That is a pretty brick right there. Okay, but you can see it's still really, it's pretty perfect. The edges are perfect, and we want this to look, you know, like a real brick. And there's some texture around brick. So we're going to add what's called a bump map. Shift A to add a bump node, and connect the factor, and then connect the normal to the normal. Okay, click over into Cycles, Render, if you were in Eevee right now, and tap it onto GPU Compute, and then you should be able to see this effect. And it gives the bricks just a little bit of grain. And then if you want, you can add a subdivision surface modifier, make sure it's simple. And then you also got to make sure that it's in experimental mode. Okay, now after you've added the bump node, let's add a displacement node. And this should be one of the last things that we need. Connect this factor to the height, and then connect the displacement to displacement on the output. And that should give it, you can see it makes it a little bit crazy right there. All right, don't panic. Rule number 1, don't panic. Just play around with these levels until it's exactly where you need to be. Okay? I'm going to make it real tiny, and then when you zoom in, now you can see it's a little bit imperfect, okay? Just like real bricks in real life, okay? Nicely done. So very quickly, we used some procedural shaders and made some bricks. So now we come down here to materials, and with our posts selected, we're going to add a white trim material to each one of these pillars on our front porch, okay? Then we're going to select the faces where we want brick on our pillars, and we're going to assign our brick texture to these pillars, okay? Just like that. And then Shift D to duplicate that and bring those pillars over, all right? Now we've got a nice little brick foundation and white trim on our pillars. And then let's do the exact same thing for these tiny little posts. They're at the bottom. And then if you add that brick texture and the bricks are vertical instead of horizontal, you need to change the cube projection. And then same thing, just add that white trim and assign it. Okay, I'm just going to add a few loop cuts on our steps here to just just extrude the base in a little bit. Make that trim kind of pop out just a scotch. Like that. Now for our porch, in a previous video, we made a wooden plank texture procedurally, and I'm going to append that right now. So I'm going to go to a different file, and then I'm going to grab that blend file. I'm going to go into materials, and I'm going to find the stylized wood, and then I'm just going to append that. So now I can use a previous resource in this file, and just like that, very quickly, we've got a nice little stylized wooden texture all the way around our porch, okay? Oh, you know what I want to do? I want to give the house some paneling. So I just hit Control-R a bunch of times, and then I'm going to bevel it just a scotch. And then I'm going to take these faces on the bevel, and I'm going to extrude along normals and bring them in a little bit, just so it gives that, it gives that look of like the siding of a house. Okay, with our window frame selected, we'll add another material. We'll call this window frame. Remember, you only want the frame, not the window. So I'll make these window panes. We'll give that a different texture altogether. Okay, so coming along. Okay, now let's add the tiles on our roof. So let's add a cube, and we'll scale it down. And I'm just going to add one tile and add a couple of loop cuts. And then I'm going to select the bottom two loop cuts and bring those down a tiny little bit. We're going to make some stylized roof tiles with proportional editing on. I'm going to grab those down a little bit. And proportional editing is your best friend. And then let's just rotate a little bit so it kind of matches, the shape of our roof. Then with these top faces selected, I'm going to rotate those again, just to kind of make it a little bit buttressed. Okay, and then you can see I don't like that center point being way out there. We're going to go to Object, Set Origin to Geometry. Now, when we rotate and scale, we do it from the center of our geometry. That's a big deal. So with our object selected, our one tile, we're going to add an array modifier, just like we did with the wood planks from our porch. And we're going to create a little space in between roof tiles, and then just run it along the width of our roof. I'm going to apply this. Okay, so this is real geometry now. You don't have to. You can just add another array modifier if you want to, but that's just something I did. So I'm going to add another array modifier and then line this up. Use your factors over here to line this up just on top of that first row of tiles. Okay, and once you've got that, and then bump up the count, and you'll create tiles all the way up your roof. Okay, then let's add a mirror modifier and make sure the mirror object is the house, and just like that, we've got the other side of the roof. I'm just going to add a cylinder with Shift A, scale this down, and this is just kind of a connector piece for the top of the roof. Just going to rotate it and then scale it along the Y. Okay, to duplicate that, rotate it along the X, and then create the roof for our, I guess this would be the broadside roof. Okay, just like that. And then, but you can see the array modifier is way too crazy, so we're going to bring it down a little bit. That's no big deal. And then I'm just going to delete the sides to kind of line it up, just to make sure that it's not, and you can see it's not going to be perfect. That's okay. We'll deal with that in a second. All right. Before we do that, give it a mirror modifier, and let's create the roof panels for the back side. Okay. And then let's Shift D to duplicate that one more time, and we'll make the top side for essentially the top roof, and put that right there. And then we're obviously going to need we'll bring the count down on our array modifiers, and then we'll just delete whatever vertices we don't need for anything that overshoots our roof. We'll just delete those right off. And just like that, we've got a nice little roof. Okay. Let's do the same thing to create the mid-level roof, that tiny little mid-level roof. Now let's Shift A to add a lattice, and this is super fun. Let's take our lattice, and we want to scale our lattice down to about the size of this front roof, okay? And we want it to envelop this front roof, all right? And then we want to scale it out like this. So our front roof is inside of this lattice. Now, go into our modifiers panel and add a lattice modifier. And then with our object right here, we want to click the object lattice, okay? And that kind of syncs the two of them up. Then come down here to lattice and bump it up, okay? Bump up the resolution. And this is kind of the equivalent of giving a loop cut to geometry, but it's giving like a loop cut to the lattice. And we want to bump up our lattice resolution a bunch. And if we've attached our roof to our lattice, now when we move our lattice, the roof moves with it, okay? So this is a way that you can make your geometry look even more stylized, because you can give it, you can make it kind of bend and loop and curl, and now, you can rid yourself of that kind of Frank Lloyd Wright perfectionist vibe. So if you're doing anything that's stylized, the lattice modifier is just an absolute prairie home companion. So let's add another one. Add another lattice modifier. We'll do the exact same thing. We're going to scale it to make sure that this section of the roof is completely within our lattice. Okay, and then scale it out to get completely within our lattice. And then same thing. With the roof selected, come down here and add a lattice modifier. And then the object that you're going to select is the lattice object. Then come back and select the lattice, and then come down to the lattice properties and bump up that resolution. And again, this is the same thing as giving loop cuts to geometry. Now we're just giving resolution to the lattice. It's essentially the same thing. And then if your roof is connected to your lattice, after you give the lattice all that resolution, you can grab the lattice and manipulate the lattice. And now the roof is going to move with it. Okay? So we can create that, that little bendy curvature of a nice little stylized roof. I feel like I've said lattice about 40 times in the last 3 minutes. It's fun to say, you guys. Lattice. Bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. So just like that, we've got a nice little stylized roof that is bendy in curvature and imperfect, okay? Now, let's have some fun. I'm just going to add a generic material onto the tiles of our roof, just so we can see what everything looks like, okay? So I'm just going to select each individual roof section and give it a roof material. Okay, so now that all of the roof has the same material, let's add some randomness to this, and we're going to do that with geometry nodes. Okay, so come up here, let's go back into the shader modifier, and then search for geometry. We're going to add a color ramp, okay, and then let's add several more colors to this color ramp. If you just hit this plus key right there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on each individual color, and I'm going to make it a different shade, a different tone of like light brown, soft brown, red brown, just so that there's some variation. And then take that bottom node right there and connect it into the fact random per island, and then select the color into the base color. And you're not going to see anything, which sucks, okay? But that's all right, because I'm looking at this in Eevee. So if you use random per island, but you don't see anything, just switch, okay, from Eevee into cycles, and then boom, just like that. Look how pretty that is. Simple geometry node, and now we've got a nice little random tiled roof, okay? So pretty quickly, we've got a beautiful roof. We use geometry nodes. We've got brick that we made using procedural shading. We've got stylized wood that we also made procedurally for our porch that we made in a different tutorial, and we're reusing it. I mean, guys, this is just a beautiful roof, and you can use this for anything. All right, so the house is pretty much done. Let's add some grass. All right, so I'm going to select this area right here, separate it with P. I'm going to add a material, just basic green, just so you can see what we're messing with right here. So our base color is green. All right, then let's add a particle system, and we'll click hair. And you can see right there, you've got something out of a Tim Burton nightmarescape. So we're going to need to bring this hair length way down. All right, and we're going to need to bump the number way up, something 50,000 or 60,000. And this does something fun. It makes it a little bit, it's way too uniform though. So come down to Brownian when we hit forces, and give it a very tiny number, something like 0.1. And you can see that it gives randomness. It kind of looks like crabgrass. Anybody that's been to America's Southeast, right, or Florida, you know what crabgrass is. You can bump that Brownian level down again, something like 0.35. And very, very quickly, we've got a fun little stylized house. We've got a procedurally generated brick. We've got some geometry nodes for the roof. We've got particle system for the grass. I'm just going to hit Shift A to add a couple of lights. I made the background world color that soft blue. I'm just going to add an area light to get the top of that. You can increase the power to, 200, whatever you'd like. I'm just going to add a few area lights here and rotate them to kind of brighten up our house. Or if you want, you can use that same environment texture and find an HDRI if you want. This is completely to taste, and this is where you get to make it your own. So I'm just going to add a few more lights here. I think I'm going to add some porch lights as well. Yeah, so I'm just going to add a quick point light right here, bring it up to the porch, duplicate that a few times, and then bring these guys down just a tiny bit. Just put the finishing touches on here quickly. I mean, you can spend as much time, background environments and lighting out scenes that's a masterclass unto itself. And then render this out, and that's all she wrote, you guys. So I hope you had fun with it. You can make this look however you want this to look. Really have fun with this. And if you do make this, then contact me and show me what you've made, and let me know. I'm excited to see it. So I hope you had fun with this. I hope you learned something. We did some modeling, some texturing, some material. We did some procedural shading. We messed with geometry nodes. We messed with particle systems. And I'm happy with it. It's a nice little stylized house. So I hope you had fun with this. I hope you learned something. If you did so, first and foremost, save your work. And I'll see you in the next one.